I'm not just working out this time of year to go do this thing. This becomes a year-long endeavor, a lifestyle, if you will. And there's an ebb and flow to it. So you're not, just getting after it all 12 months, right? There's a progression. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing we're talking about here where, I like to say, take advantage of your training environment.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefendorfer, founder and CEO of Mountain Tough, and we are so glad that you are here. We love seeing you come back and engaging week after week into these episodes. It is our goal to bring you inspiring guests, the best of the best, each and every single week, unpacking their tools, their mindset tools, their mental fitness, the tools they use to overcome adversity so that we can unpack that. You can learn from it and apply that to your life so that you can live that always ready lifestyle, that virtuous, abundant life. If you are a brand new listener, we are so glad that you are here. And for our loyal listeners, if you haven't done so already, if you have a second to leave us a rating or review on this show in the podcast store of your choice, those do mean the world to us, to me, to the Mountain Tough team. We are big believers in iron sharpens iron, so we love seeing your feedback come through. And the rankings and reviews do allow these episodes through the algorithm to get out to more people, to transform more lives. So if you have a second, those do mean a ton to us and the Mountain Tough team. Transitioning over to Mountain Tough, if you have not yet seen the Gym Daily, I highly encourage you to check that out in the Mountain Tough app. The Gym Daily is as close as we really could get digitally to training you as a personal trainer in your gym. So think of Mountain Tough coaches being next to you in your home gym or in your local gym, training you every single day, mission specifically for the always ready lifestyle and the backcountry. So in the Gym Daily, in the app, you just hit play and we coach you just like we're in your gym with you through a gym progression. Every month has a journey. Every day has a specific purpose. You hit play, you're following a Mountain Tough coach. You have a Mountain Tough athlete to compete with. So I highly encourage you to check that out if you are training with gym equipment. It's a phenomenal product. There's no time to get distracted. There's no time to be checking your phone. You are with us engaged the whole entire time. If you haven't logged in to the Mountain Tough app yet, if you haven't checked it out, I do want to let you know, as a Mountain Tough podcast listener, you do get a 6-week free trial code. So if you want to check out those gym dailies or the minimal gear daily or our mobility daily, any other one of our programs, our mission specific programs like Preseason Prep 2.0, you can test that out for 6 weeks at no charge. So all you need to do is go to mountaintough.com, click start free trial, and then enter the code MOUNTAINPOD. That's all one word, all caps, MTNPOD. Mountain Pod will get you 6 weeks for free. So you can do 6 weeks of gym dailies before you make a purchasing decision. We would love for you to try that out. mountaintough.com, enter the code MTNPOD. Now, transitioning over to today's guest. Today is a phenomenal episode with one of the legends in the industry, John Barklow. I have known about John for a long time, both being based here in Bozeman, Montana. John has always been a legend in Bozeman. His background gave him so much experience and wisdom and knowledge that we're very excited to share with the Mountain Tough community. John, after being a U.S. Navy diver, he got a gig where he trained U.S. Special Forces, mostly SEALs, on Kodiak Island in cold weather winter warfare survival. He had that job for about 2 decades. So for about 2 decades, he trained U.S. Special Forces on cold weather, winter survival. Many of you have seen his rewarming drill. It went viral a couple years ago, where he's going to throw you into the ice, hold you there for a while, get you out, and then you got to figure out how to rewarm your body and your teams as well. He's a phenomenal human, and we have a phenomenal conversation today about how important it is for him in this later stage of his life to pass on all of the wisdom he has learned about survival, modern survival, being a better hunter, being an elk hunter, being an archery hunter. It is a great, great episode full of many golden nuggets. So stand by for my conversation with John Barklow. I'd love to dive into some of that stuff. Even your points about how many people getting into hunting think that they're going to go out and harvest a 6-point bull in their first couple of years, where it's the reality is probably like 10 years of raghorns before you get that chance at that 320, 340 bull.
Yeah, and I just don't think when I say we, it's not just the community. It's just we as hunters haven't done that great a job communicating that, right? And I'm not a psychologist. There's probably lots of reasons, but if we want to bring people in, we want to keep them engaged. We all want success. I want success for them, not at my trailhead, but I want success for them. It's just kind of like just not sugarcoating it as much and just giving them a little bit more of that reality. And as we discussed, when you grow up doing it, with your brother or your dad or your granddad, and you start with the squirrel and go to the rabbit and then you get the doe and et cetera. Most people don't start shooting a 320 public land bull with their bow to start their hunting career, right? And so it's kind of this slow progression, this slow burn to that. But when you're getting into it later in life and then you just see you just consume the media that's out there. I'm not putting it down at all. You can get the wrong impression.
Yeah.
And then you get let down, the vast majority of people. And it's like, well, have we really done anything to help our community, our profession, and those people, right? Hunters at large. And I just don't think we have.
Yeah. It's not talked about a lot at all. Randy talked about it somewhat on the podcast him and I did together. Yep. And then Corey Jacobson talked about it in a very similar fashion, that like Randy spoke about taking 10 years or so to harvest that first elk with his bow. And I think the more that we're having those conversations, the better, because if you are someone that would like to get into hunting and you don't know, especially like public land, do-it-yourself elk hunting is that tough that it might take you 10 years. If you don't know that going in,
right,
then your perspective is different and you might quit way too early because you didn't have the right perspective on the front end.
Yeah. And it's not that, we talked about those mentors. So it's not like people aren't talking about it, but I think we need to talk about it more. And, I like to say, enjoy the journey. So if you have this idea that, hey, this might be a 10-year journey to, maybe start my hunting life, learn to shoot a bow, learn elk behavior, get in shape, call, all these things, and hopefully beat the odds. But if not, it's a decade-long journey, and to kind of enjoy that and that progression as an outdoorsman, as a person who's getting fit, learning the mountains and all that. I think it's a different mindset. It gives you that patience. I like to say, people need to have patience with themselves. And I say that out loud so that I can hear myself say it sometimes, but, have that patience. And, I'd heard the stat when I got here, it was 7 years on average to kill and maybe it was a bull, a branch antler bull on public land. And maybe that was agnostic of weapon, but
yep.
That 10 years, it's like, yeah, that's looking at friends and things like that, that's about right.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think that, I'm just like you, I'm big on training, right? And I'm big on preparing people mentally, physically, emotionally for these things. And if they're only looking to shoot, that bull, and they pass all these other legal animals on the way, they're missing the opportunity to learn, to increase their skills and like bank that experience to when that bull walks by 10 years, from now, that they're confident, they've got some experience under the belt, they can execute that shot in the heat of the moment, and then they know how to pack it off the mountain, have done all those things. So there's just this whole lifelong, toolbox of skills and experiences that you need. And I think that people are shorting themselves on that to go, nope, it's, throw a number out. And it's okay to do that at a certain point, I think, but I don't think you necessarily need to start there.
For sure. Remy and I were talking about this same topic a few weeks ago, and he was talking about it from the perspective of how awesome it would be to have one of his films that just showed failure after failure after failure after failure. And he could do that, but he's like, no one would end up watching that film because everyone is expecting some sort of animal to be harvested in a hunting film. And the opposite, what actually is happening behind the scenes of like 99% of hunting films is failure, 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 failure. And if you really showed that to the world, you would show that, hiking clips, glassing clips, hiking clips. And as eventually no one would watch that. But that creates a lot of that skewed perspective of what people may expect becoming a new hunter versus the reality of what it's going to be like. But the journey is worth it, and the journey is so much fun. I remember my introduction to archery hunting. We got introduced to a group of guys in Billings, Montana at the local archery shop. And my dad was a competitive indoor archery guy, but we hadn't done a bunch of archery hunting yet. And so the guys at the shop kind of took us under their wing. And I remember years and years and years of just stupid mistakes out there in the field with the wind and our calling, like scent control. And I remember some of the old timers coming back to base camp in the middle of the day. We were hunting the break, so we'd meet back up in the middle of the day. And they had Sony handy cams back then, so like the little Sony handy cam. And they would show all this footage of the bulls that they saw and the bulls that they passed up. And they were these older legendary traditional archery hunters. And so they were passing up bulls looking for a trophy bull. And my dad and I would come back without like even seeing an elk or busting countless groups of elk.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did they get in front of so many amazing elk? And I always thought there was like some magic ingredient.
It certainly seems like it at the time, doesn't it? Yeah.
But the journey is so awesome. Like learning that way is incredible. And I think just keeping that perspective right. And we were so lucky because we had those real mentors right there with us. So talking to them at camp and talking to them in the mornings, and sometimes they would take us with them out for the day. But a lot of what you see nowadays is the mentor has become more digital.
Yes.
Which has changed the game a little bit.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there. So I'm a self-taught archery hunter from Ohio, right? So nobody in my family really hunted. My dad bird hunted a little bit, but nobody archery hunted. And for whatever reason, it was like, it's still to this day, like 40 some years later, it's like a passion. Like every day I wake up, I'm like, man, I'm so stoked. Like I want to go shoot or tune a bow or plan a trip or whatever, But some of my most cherished memories of hunting and just being in the outdoors are when I was that kid. Mm-hmm. And when I was, screwing a Thunderhead on a big double X75, or 2315 arrow with, no idea what I was going to do if I actually got a shot at an animal, or getting lost in the woods and carrying the can of Dinty Moore stew, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But those are some of my most cherished memories, just because it was, I didn't know a lot and I was learning, a little bit naive and all that stuff. But I kind of think back on that. And then you jump ahead, and I always wanted to be that person who was self-reliant. I wanted to be that, just for lack of a better term, like that survival-minded person, right? That you could drop me off anywhere and I could manage it. I could figure it out. And through a bizarre, long, circuitous set of life circumstances, I believe I've achieved that. Mm-hmm. And so at a certain point, you sit there and go, okay, well, I've got this information and it's good for me, but it's kind of selfish to keep it to myself, right? And so one of the things in that vein that I'm assuming I just assume other groups do this, but in the military, especially in the special operations community, that I was in teaching for all those years, we would do these things called lessons learned. Mm. And so it didn't matter if you were done at the end of an operation or a training evolution, be it a day or a week, you would sit down, and people did it differently, but each person would write their individual lessons learned, and then they would collect that, and then the group would write their collective lessons learned, and then that would be stored somewhere that, if I was the next group coming in to train or a unit overseas, I could pick that up and read, oh, yeah, don't go out on this day at this time, or, avoid this drainage, or, hey, make sure that you bring a second pair of socks, or whatever the case may be. And so you're learning and you're passing on that knowledge that was hard-earned right before you. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think things really begin to scale. And so to go back to Remy's film, it's like, yeah, we are trying to build something, or in his case, build something that's entertaining. And so you want to see that culmination, right? That success at the end. Yeah. But sometimes what I think we all gloss over, to include myself, is those times where you are indecisive, you are in pain, you are thirsty, you are dealing with a blister that, you had as a hot spot and let go too long, right? Or whatever the case may be. And so, some of that's to protect our ego, of course, mm-hmm. but ultimately it's like if we come at it with this approach that we're trying to help others, right, be that mentor or pass on those lessons learned, it's important to show some of that. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I would say that we collectively, individuals, the industry, et cetera, have maybe glamorized too much backcountry hunting and not talked enough about the pain, the suffering, the indecisions, and those times of failure. Because I think those are the ones that you really remember. Like, of course I remember the success, right? But I don't remember a lot of the details. Yeah. But the ones that I absolutely sucked and failed and, made the same mistake, like, man, I should know better. And I made the same mistake, like, again and again and again, mm-hmm. and got the blister, or, whatever the case may be. Those are the ones I really remember. And so it's like, how do we pass that on? Maybe not for the person to not make the same mistake, but at least be a little better prepared to manage it once they do make that mistake.
Yeah. Do you think that was a maturity thing for you also, to get to a point to where you were ready and willing to pass it on? I remember for me, I had done about 10 years of archery elk hunting, maybe less than 10, 5 to 10, when I saw Corey Jacobson's first Elk 101 course released. And I remember I was kind of mad. I was like, man, he's just giving away all of that information that that generation I was with, we all kind of learned the hard way. We learned through trial and error. Yep. And I think about things differently now, but it took a little bit of maturity to get to a mindset of where passing it on is the correct answer.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Some maturity. I think with that comes the ability to put that ego in check. Mm-hmm. I would tell you that I didn't really begin to, I'm not going to say I've mastered my craft, but I would say I didn't get to the point of beginning to master my craft until I started to teach. And when I started to teach, that's when I realized kind of where I fell in the hierarchy, and that I could learn from anybody in any situation. And that kind of helped temper my ego. Mm-hmm. And then when I call them the pros. There's no real pros, but when I'd see the pros, like, I've got some buddies who are professional alpine climbers and buddies who are professional backcountry skiers. And of course, we know friends that we'll call them professional hunters, right? And that even though they have those decades of experience and all this maybe worldly knowledge, they still make that mistake. And so that helps kind of like put you in your place a little bit and go, yeah, man, like we're all just trying to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And if you have something to pass along, maybe at that point it's worth it. And so I understand where you're coming from with the calling, mm-hmm. right? So when, John Dudley and Levi Morgan and maybe even, Snyder and some of those guys started putting out archery knowledge. And I'm like, man, where were you guys the last 20, 30 years? Like where I made every single mistake so many times and, mm-hmm. but it wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I truly appreciate now that they do it. And I thank them, when I see them to go, hey, thanks. Cause even now, like I need that little bit of, mm-hmm. Check.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of get to where you realize that there's still so much we don't know. There's so much we don't know every day. Even as we're learning every day, I think as I've gotten older, I realized there's an incredible amount, endless amount of information I don't know. And that does start to open your eyes that it is iron sharpens iron. And there is something that each and every person can teach us.
Yeah. The other thing is I think that we have to evolve our skills and the way we apply them as we age, mm-hmm. right? So as an example, I can't do the same things now that I could do at 30, right? So it's probably not a good strategy for me to plan my hunt to go 12, 15 miles deep into the backcountry and stay there for a week and think that me and a buddy can pack, a bull out or something like that. Because mm-hmm. Even though I'm in shape for my age, like I'm not in shape as a 30-year-old. So what skills have I developed that I can now leverage, right? So as an example, do I know elk habitat better? Can I call better? Can I e-scout better? All those things to find areas maybe closer to the road so I don't have to go as deep. Or, mm-hmm. Is my shooting ability better now than it was that my effective range is twice what it is so I can hunt more open country where I, had to hunt more forested and, hope for those close-in calling scenarios, like mm-hmm. Whatever it is, and just trying to like figure out as I mature, right, how I can leverage my skills to the best of my ability depending on where I am and what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And there's different environments where, I feel very, very comfortable in the mountains, and especially the mountains in winter. You put me in a desert, not so much. You put me in a jungle, I'm not at home at all, right? And so then I become the newbie again, whereas in another environment, maybe I'm considered the master, mm-hmm. right? And so it's fascinating, but that's all putting that ego in check and just understanding that it's this journey of lifelong learning, and like be excited about that. I like to say be a student of the game.
Yeah.
Like just embrace it.
Yeah. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH, all caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Yeah, and you do get to where you start to look for ways to work smarter instead of working harder.
Absolutely.
And working harder is the tendency of more of a beginner mindset, like push harder, never stop pushing. But especially in hunting, when kind of some of that patience kicks in, you counterintuitively become more successful, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
You're not just pushing right past elk anymore. You're trying to like slow down and make sure that you're paying attention to everything.
Yeah, I've helped some folks over the years that have just reached out and say they're coming from back east, very low altitude, can't really train in mountains. They're on stair steppers and doing box steps and things like that. And they want to come out to, say, Colorado, and, the trailhead's at 9,000 feet. And then the thing that they, the pin they dropped, or the series of pins they dropped on the map, are at 12,000 feet. And like, man, this can be like everything I know. The elk are going to be here, this and that. And the reality is that they can't get there, right? Or they can't get there in a week, or they can't get there and still be, I don't know how else is combat effective, right? Or hunter effective, right?
Yep.
And so trying to figure out like how to do that. And I said, well, hey, instead of driving to the trailhead from the airport, so from 5,000 to 9,000 feet, then hiking to 12,000 feet, how about you fly to Denver, spend a night at 5,000, then drive to the trailhead, spend another night there, maybe hunt around there, scout, hydrate, get ready, pack your gear, and then spend 2 days or 3 days getting to 12,000 feet and hunt your way there, right? And maybe you'll never get there because you'll find elk sooner. And just that different mindset and that approach, and like, oh, you can do that, and like that's cool. Like, I'm like, there's no rules. It's like, yeah, one person may be able to do that who lives in that area, but maybe you can't. And so figure out the strategy that's going to work for you. And there's this evolution, of an outdoorsman. And, at first we don't have a lot of experience, so we use gear as a crutch, and we carry way too much because it's comforting. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have enough experience to be dangerous, and so we cut everything out of our pack. I remember doing this, and that's probably like the most dangerous time, because you have a little bit of experience and a big ego, but you really don't have the experience to get yourself out of any kind of jam. And then eventually you end up in some kind of equilibrium, right? Where you have a little bit of gear, but the gear you have, you really know how to use, and you got a ton of experience to back it up where you can ad-lib it.
Yeah.
And so that's part of that journey, right? And so watching some of these folks that I've been helping and talking to, mentoring, if you will, and seeing them progress, right? And then start to come back with their own strategies. And I'm like, yeah, that's brilliant. Like, actually, I wouldn't have thought about that. Like now they're starting to really mature is that outdoorsman,
That's
and
awesome.
that's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah.
And, those folks still have not killed a branch antlered bull, but when they look at the success differently, they're still hungry and motivated to keep getting after it year after year because they can see that progression and they know that goal is attainable now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas those first 3 years, I mean, they were literally ready to quit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, don't quit yet. Let's think about this and maybe restructure your plan and then put a timeline on it and see what you do. And so, that's been interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's so helpful. It's so helpful to lay out that foundation of restructuring your plan and your perspective. Because if every new archery elk hunter was told that the plan is to not think about harvesting a branch antlered bull until year 5, and if you do that, if you harvest one before year 5, it's kind of a bonus icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
If you went into the game with that mindset, it would be a completely different journey, and it would lead to like a lot more satisfaction, because you'd be, in those early years, you'd be satisfied with everything you're learning and the friends you're with and the country you're in, and just how great of an opportunity it is to have the privilege to hunt in these mountains and to see the stuff that we get to see and see the animals that we get to see, and like the bonds and fellowship that can form with good friends and family members in the backcountry. If you're looking at it a lot more from that lens than the lens of being successful every time, then the whole experience changes.
Yeah, we tend to, when I say we, like, I think nowadays we almost kind of focus on, hunting or the harvesting of an animal of a certain size or whatever, almost as a controlled sporting event.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not, right? There's no referees, there's no timeouts, there's no rules really except, some rules for the state, but it's kind of like you can approach this any way you want. And I think when you take the sports analogy out of it and go, this is a lifestyle, this is a lifelong journey, there's so many things that are, I don't want to say more important, but as important at least, as that harvest of that animal, right? Attaining that goal, which is those friendships, which is those skills, which is being outdoors and like becoming self-reliant and the the mindset that comes with that. Like that's where I think the richness is of the experience. And I think I know I listened to the podcast, but if I recall, I think you were saying you and your dad were backpacking, and things like that prior to hunting. And obviously if you're going to backcountry hunt, that's a component of it. If you're going to whitetail hunt, say back east, it's not so much. But if you're going to come out here, you're going to move around the backcountry. I call it the care and feeding of the hunter, right? And what I mean by that is before you ever get to the point of utilizing the skills of your accuracy of shooting a bow or a rifle, or the ability to judge that animal or use the call or whatever the case may be, you've got to pack your gear, load your food, be able to carry it out there and sustain yourself, because that's a guarantee that you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to feed yourself. You're going to have to dry yourself out. You're going to have to create a camp that's safe. You and your buddy take care of each other, manage any medical issues. Like, that's a given. The killing of the animal is the bonus, right? And so in the off season, call it, that's the time, if you haven't had that background of backpacking and camping with your family, like that's the time to go get that experience. And so now, if this is spring, you could plan those trips to go to the high lake and go fishing, right? And light fires now while snow's still on the ground so that you're not worried about burning the forest down, and figuring out your meal plan and breaking in boots and tweaking your gear and figuring out what works and doesn't work. So then when you get to season and you are hiking in, that becomes second nature. You're very comfortable with that 40, 50, 60 pound pack on your back. You know how to set your tent up in the dark, in the wind. You know that X dehydrated meal is going to taste good and that the rest of your food's going to fuel you. And now you can focus on why you're really there, which is to, try to find that animal, whatever that case may be, and then make that good ethical shot and then get it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you only approach it as this bull, this buck, whatever, with a whatever weapon system, and there's all this other stuff here that if you don't have that sorted, which these guys have been talking to you about, they didn't have any of that experience. So that's what they've been figuring out. And now they're to the point where they can focus, right? So like when I would train guys, there's levels. So kind of the entry level, you could have a guy that, maybe he did take a 30 days NOLS course. Maybe he did grow up like you and already know how to backpack. But I also might have a kid from a city who's never seen a mountain or a flake of snow.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, let's figure this out and make sure everybody's at least on the same foundational level,
mm-hmm.
and that we can assume that at the end of this, block of training. So boom, we do that. And the intent of that block of training was, let's call it 30 days, 6 weeks, maybe something like that, was to basically try to make everyone self-sufficient. So I could take care of myself. I can't take care of you. I can't take care of the team. I can't even think about the mission. All I can do is take care of myself, make sure that I'm fed, I'm clothed, and I got my shit together, right? Then after that, you can get to the next level where it's, okay, now we're all self-reliant. Now I can start looking out for you and you can start looking out for me.
Yeah.
So there's a safety net, so we can start pushing it. And now we can start factoring in, I'm going to use just some military analogies, but now I can start factoring in tactics, right? Now I can start factoring in some mission focus, because I don't have to worry about feeding myself. That's kind of intuitive now. And I'm strong enough, I can look to you and go, hey, have you changed your socks today? Yeah, all right, check. Now let's focus back on this. And then you get to the level where I can take care of myself. I don't even worry about myself anymore. I watch you, but I don't really worry about you. And I'm solely focused on the mission. And that's where the success comes from. And that's where things really start to ramp up and go super fast, and things really begin to get achieved, right?
Yeah.
And so if hunters approach it the same way, which is, let me make sure I can be self-reliant just to go live and move around the mountains. I'm not worried about my navigation. I'm not worried about feeding myself. I'm not worried about blisters. And I know that no matter what, if I get wet or whatever the case may be, I don't have to punch the SOS button right away. I can just settle down and ride this storm out. And then you go do that with a friend, and you're like, now you have that bond, right? That we talk about, that sacred bond. And now that becomes what I call a force multiplier. So it's like, if I'm having a bad day, you bring me up. If you're having a bad day, I bring you up. So now we figured all that out in the off season. Okay, boom. Now comes September. Now we can go apply all those cool guy skills, the calling, the shooting, the packing, right? Apply the camo face paint and all that, and actually go focus on the mission now and get the hunt done. And I think people look at it completely opposite and back into the skills that actually are the ones that are going to get them success in the field.
Man, that is...
So sorry, that was a little bit long-winded, but...
That is so helpful. There's a lot to unpack there, but it's so accurate from my perspective and what I've seen growing up out here. I think of a lot of friends over the years that have come out to hunt from out east or the Midwest, and that scenario that you just laid out, I've seen over and over again compared to the other side. So the scenario of someone getting ready to come out west or go to Alaska or British Columbia that you see a lot is they will read and watch an insane amount of information with a very heavy focus on gear. So you'll see a lot of, I want to have the perfect rifle, the perfect headlamp, the perfect pack, the perfect boots, and they're focusing most of their thoughts around watching others and kind of an obsession with the perfect gear to bring on that upcoming expedition. But they're not putting a lot of experiences and days in the field in that gear, or just getting that base of being out in the outdoors before that trip arrives. And that's where you do see that exact scenario happen in front of your eyes when you take that person out on a hunt, because they're out in the field now with you after kind of obsessing all summer over content and gear. But in the field, they're still not what you called combat effective, because in the field, because they haven't spent a lot of time in the field yet, they're maneuvering, they're tweaking their gear, they're playing with their gear. They're focused on some technology, apps, mapping apps, rather than having their eyes up, focusing on the actual experience. And what it made me think of these like mentors in my life of really good hunting buddies, kind of the opposite viewpoint is when you have like a hunting buddy or a friend or a mentor that's just like the insane mountain man. And it reminded me of, as you were talking, it reminded me of the book Deep Survival, and how in that book he talks about one of the keys for people that die versus people that live in a survival situation. The people that live have this very deep layer of cumulative experiences. And that's what I see with phenomenal hunting partners every time is you'll see how like their pack is laid out and the food that they pack in that pack. And what you start noticing is they'll be like, you're on an elk hunt, but they'll be like, I bring this kit because I learned X, Y, and Z on a bear hunt earlier this spring. Or I bring these kind of snacks because shed hunting this spring, I learned that it fuels my body really well. Or I set up my tent this way because I did that with my family this summer. And so you start to notice that like September wasn't their first time on the mountain. It was like their 40th or 50th time.
Yeah.
And then you multiply that by 10 years and they're just very comfortable being outside, and they have their eyes up focused on the hunt now because they're not worried about anything else, because all of that preparation happened outside of hunting season, which that point alone it really is not talked about very much. And even Mountain Tough fails at talking about that point until recently we've been talking about it more. But you could be training mission specifically fitness wise for your hunt, but if you don't get outside in the woods a bunch of times with your pack on before your expedition, like we're doing an injustice by not pushing you to get outside as much as possible. Even if you're outside in the Midwest or the East Coast preparing for a Western hunt, all the things you learn outside, you can't learn in content, you can't learn in a magazine article, and you can't learn in the gym.
Yeah, it's that sport specific training, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you're providing the foundation, like you're building that base, which is critical. But you have to have some of these other things as well. That's why I like, another term I like to say is really there's no off season. Mm-hmm. And just what I mean by that is, same thing you guys are doing. It's like, I'm not just working out this time of year to go do this thing. This becomes a year-long endeavor, a lifestyle, if you will. And there's an ebb and flow to it. So you're not, just getting after it all 12 months, right? There's a progression. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing we're talking about here where, I like to say, take advantage of your training environment. So, now's the perfect, now or, last month, as winter was kind of waning, was the perfect time to train for this next fall's late season hunts, which seems odd, right? But you're like, when is the other opportunity for you to go try that jacket, try that tent, try that sleeping bag, try that food, shoot that rifle in the cold, whatever the case may be. You got to do it now for later. And just trying to kind of lay that out and kind of figure it out for yourself, And so I think we need that, but it's not just like, it's not one thing and not the other. It's like all of it. And that's where the journey comes in. So it's like, by the time September rolls around, you're like, man, it I don't want to say it's boring, but it's kind of like boring. Like if we all use gear as a crutch, and I sell, right? I work for a company that sells gear, and I love it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like I probably pick the same, like I could go pack my ruck right now in 20 minutes because it's all laying there and I know exactly what I need. And then if I don't have something, that's where the experience comes in to go, yeah, I can live with that, or I can live with this, or, one thing I wanted to talk about is that experience then becomes critical when something goes wrong, right? And so I don't like to use the term survival situations as often. I use terms like unplanned contingencies and, just things go bad. But because I think when you say survival, you always go to the extreme, but it's like, if all of a sudden now I'm comfortable living in the environment and I'm comfortable with my navigation and everything, all that. And now you and I are packing a mule deer back to camp and we get benighted and stuck in a cliff band. We don't know, it's a new area. Say we're down in Utah and we get stuck in a cliff band. Well, if I'm not confident and comfortable in that environment and I don't have the right gear and I don't know that, man, all I need to do is sit on my little foam ground pad or sit on some pine boughs and put my puffy jacket and rain gear on, and we're going to ride the night out just sitting here and wait till daylight to figure out our navigation and make it safely down through the cliffs or go back up. If we don't have that confidence to make that proper decision, what's going to happen oftentimes is people panic or people feel the need to rush and they're like, man, we got to get down through these cliffs right now. And I know this isn't the best place to be, but like, we can't spend the night on the mountain, or I don't want to spend the night on the mountain, or I'm afraid of being cold, or whatever the case may be. And that's when somebody falls, breaks the leg, breaks the ankle, hits their head, goes unconscious, whatever the case may be, right? Breaks the inReach, you can't communicate. I mean, right? That's where the what ifs just
start stacking.
Exactly. And it's because you're not confident and comfortable. And so you have the gear maybe, but you don't have the experience to use it, or the other end of you don't have the gear because you think you can figure it out, right? And so all this leads to your survivability out there because that drives your decision-making process. And for me anyways, what I've found is, oftentimes the hardest decisions for me to make, like, seriously, man, like we just came 1,000 feet down this mountain.
Yeah.
And we are completely cliffed out.
Now we got to sit here.
And and maybe we got to climb back out and go all the way back around. Yeah. And you're like, no. Like the inexperienced me, or if I'm not in the right mindset, I'm like, nah, like we're going to try it. And that's when bad things can happen. But most of the time it's like, and this is when I was teaching and I had other people of various skill levels where I couldn't make that decision for myself maybe, or me and you. It's like now I've got a collective and it's like, nope, we're going to go back 1,000 feet up. We're going to make the right decision. We're going to walk around and we're going to get out of here safe. But that came from experience, a lot of time, and quite frankly, making a lot of bad decisions and getting into some pretty tough situations, but that's where you get that, right? And so if you have that premium tag in your pocket that's so hard to draw sometimes anymore, or you're running on, your 1 7-day block of vacation, do you really want to spend the first 3 days kind of figuring out how to live out there and spend the last 4 days hunting? Or do you want to spend from day 1 to day 7 hunting because you spent all this other time at home on the weekends, whatever the case may be, kind of getting ready?
Yeah. So are you recommending to a lot of folks now to find ways to do trips, any kind of outdoor experience multiple times throughout the year. Is that like a course of action that you're advising and is working for people?
Yeah, I mean, if they can, and obviously everybody's situation's a little different, but as an example, let's say that we've got an elk hunt planned in, I'll pick a different state, so I'm not picking on Colorado. We have an elk hunt planned in Idaho for September, and I've got a year to kind of plan for that, right? So just got done with this last season. What am I going to do to get ready for next season? And it's like, well, the first thing you could do is, right, start getting in better shape.
Mm-hmm.
Take whatever you learned lesson-wise, and that's when you tweak your gear. So maybe I need a new pair of orthotics. Maybe I need a new pair of rain pants. You know, maybe that pack didn't work, or whatever the case may be. And kind of work up to that as, you know, the end of that year. So October, November, December, January kind of wane down. And now you start to plan, et cetera. You're like, okay, well, this winter, I'm going to go and, you know, test my cold weather clothing system. I'm going to test that sleeping bag. I'm going to test that tent. I'm going to learn how to build snow anchors, whatever the case may be, because, you know, we're going to be at 11,000 feet. And if that, because it happens, if that freak September storm comes in, we don't want to be caught off guard. Plus, let's be honest, like, it's fun. It's like, hopefully we all enjoy being outside and like having adventures. So it's like me and you are going to go out. We're going to continue to build that bond. We're going to learn how each other kind of operates. I'm going to work on my food, et cetera. And then if you can, right, ideally in a perfect world, you're like, oh, you know what? And this April, we're going to go spring bear hunt in the same unit we're going to elk hunt in. So we're not just going to fly Google Earth over it. Like, we're actually going to put boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't do that. So go, you know what? Maybe we'll go to Colorado and bear hunt, but they'll both be at 10, 11,000 feet, and we'll see how we feel, right? But that's a way to, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't take bear hunting in the spring seriously, but, you know, it's an opportunity to get out and start applying some of those skills before, say, your primary objective, which is the September elk hunt.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, or you hike to the high lake to go fish, maybe you go do that and just, you know, bring the Tenkara rod and a tarp, and, you know, maybe you've got a stove for backup, maybe not, but, you know, that's how you're going to feed yourself. Or maybe you do that in the summer on those family trips where you're out there with your boys or your kids, right? And you're learning, and you're just, you know, you're getting that familiarity, you're getting that pack on your back. I like to say you're breaking your feet into your boots, right? Because oftentimes that's the way it feels. And then by the time September rolls around, you might have 30, 45 days outdoors under your belt and have kind of checked off some of these. Like, I know my food's going to work. I know how I perform at altitude. I know what my hydration levels need to be. I know the sleeping bag's going to keep me warm, or I know if I get my base layer wet that I can dry it out in 30 minutes. Like, these things are critically important over time when you want to start, I'll say, pushing your boundaries, and everybody's boundaries are different. But it's like, people want to go from that base level I talked about, that maybe guy from the city who's never seen a snowflake fly, to masters or PhD level hunting, public land, do it yourself, over the counter, archery, elk hunting, right? To me, the hardest thing to have success in North America. And they want to start there, and they haven't even taken the 101 class. More importantly, who are the people, who are the mentors that are going to help those people on their journey to get from point A to point B? And they might have a friend, or they might tune into a podcast, but we collectively as hunters, just in the last no more than 10 years, but we haven't done a good job of helping those people achieve that. I think some of it is because we don't want the competition. Let's be honest. We're hunters. I want to help you. I don't want to see you at my trailhead.
I know.
I want you to find
unique.
success, but not in my drainage. And so it's almost this very, like, cliquish, secretive cult almost, right? Where, like, I want to help you, but I don't want to help you too much. And it's kind of to your point where, you know, Corey and them were talking about elk calling. But it's like, but we also can't expect the community to continue to grow and for us to keep our hunting rights and for, you know, a brand like mine to keep selling gear if we don't bring more people in and help them on that journey. And so, you know, what is that? And I think this has been overhyped. And this has been underhyped.
Yeah.
And it should be just the opposite, and let people progress as they will, you know? And so if you start here, maybe you decide archery hunting isn't your thing and you decide to become a fly fisherman, or maybe you just become a backpacker or a bird watcher, or maybe you become, you know, a mountain climber.
Yeah.
Maybe you do kill that bull. Awesome. But understand it's probably not going to happen in your first several years, and just kind of think of it that way. And it's the people that start a little later. You know, you and I started early, but I would say I didn't have the background you did. You know, that we had the patience, so to speak, even if it didn't feel like it, because we had the time to get there. If I started at 40, I'd be like, man, if I don't kill a bull like right away, I'm just wasting my time. I'm going to go back and play golf.
Yeah.
You know, which, hey, if you want to play golf, have at it.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. It is so fascinating, because if you were 40 and did want to get into golf, you would not have a great experience if you just listen to podcasts and watch videos without going out and swinging the golf club.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what's going on in hunting, is people aren't out there building those cumulative experiences. And if you do take that path of backpacking, bear hunting, shed hunting, fishing, certainly what I think is going to happen is it's going to be a very enjoyable path. And it is amazing what it's going to do for like your soul and your family. But definitely it's going to start cutting that success timeline in half. So someone who becomes an outdoorsman is going to have a much higher probability of harvesting that bull quicker than someone who's not an outdoorsman. And all those things just start stacking on each other, which you see all the time with experienced outdoorsmen, is like they know how the elk are going to move through a canyon because they saw it in spring bear season, or they know like the ledges the elk are going to probably lay on because they saw some things in shed hunting season. They know like how they want to set up their tripod and spotting scope, not because of last elk season, but because of bear and shed season. And so these outdoorsman experiences are really what is making them more successful than some of the actual tactical skills of elk hunting.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the tactical skills are fun, right? I think total archery challenges is an example, right? Like going out and shooting 3D and these ski areas, like it's fun and it's helped. But I would be willing to bet that the vast majority of the people that are newer to hunting or Western hunting know far more about their bow or their rifle than they do about the kit that's going to keep them alive and safe in the backcountry.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be the opposite, at least to start, right?
Yeah.
So, my background has just kind of brought me there. And so that's where, that term knowledge from storms came from, kind of this term that to me describes knowledge based on experience and knowledge based on experience and a lot of poor decisions, right? More importantly. So it's like trial by fire, like the burnt hand learns best.
Yeah.
And it's like, people need that. You don't want them to touch the stove, right? But you're like, oh, kid, I told you.
Yeah.
And as long as they're not going to kill themselves, you let them do it.
Yeah.
So I like to say, folks like myself and you, like, you still have to climb the mountain, but we can start you a little farther up the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of starting from the ground, we can start you, 300 feet up to kind of help you on your way. But you still, at the end of the day, have to climb the mountain on your own.
Mm-hmm.
How fast you do that and where you start are kind of dependent on you. But the information's out there nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to just get outside and apply it.
Yeah, and that's the fun part.
So backing up to the beginning, you talked about how you are getting closer to being a master of a craft.
Yeah.
How do you articulate nowadays what that craft is?
Yeah, I thought I had you on that question, and then right at the end. Yeah, it's a good question because I don't. So first of all, I don't think I'm a master of any of them, but I am moving in that direction. I don't know if there's certainly not a college course that I know of that you would take, but I would say maybe a master of self-reliance, right? I don't want to say survival, but some people would apply the term survival, like, oh, you're a survival expert. Maybe, right? An outdoorsman. Maybe that's a good term, right? But to me, it's like this, I always wanted to be self-reliant. When I would look at those pictures in Outdoor Life or whatever the case may be, or I remember there was a military survival manual. I don't know how I got it, but when I was a kid, and it was this line drawing of a guy, and he's kind of stooped over a fire, and he's got a beanie on, he's got a survival knife on his hip, and he's got a fish laid there that he's about ready to cook on a stick. And I'm like, I want to be that guy. And then, upon reflection, what I was really trying to kind of say to myself is I wanted to be that person who was comfortable and reliant outdoors. And, that it has been a lifelong journey. So I would say that's what I'm trying to master. So I'll give you a couple maybe anecdotes that'll help describe this. So there was a friend of mine who was a professional alpine climber, world-class level. And he was one of the people that would test clothing and equipment for Patagonia at the time. And so he helped us when we were developing this clothing system for the military. We brought him in on contract. I became friends. I'm still friends with him today. He's definitely one of my mentors. He's taught me a lot, not just specifically about clothing or equipment, but just like in life in general, training, etc. But I'm asking him all these questions, right? And I'm like, why do you use that? And why do you use that? Because again, you're like, there must be a very, very specific reason this person is using that piece of kit. And there might be, but there might not be. And he said, and I'll paraphrase, but he said, John, I'm so good at what I do. I'm so comfortable outdoors. I know how everything works and the why behind it that, again, he was testing gear for Patagonia. He goes, they could give me a trash bag and I could figure out how to make it work. And what he meant by that was he knew the pros and cons or strengths and weaknesses of that trash bag and how to integrate it to get the most performance he could out of the trash bag. Not that he's saying the trash bag was better than the jacket, but that if that's all he had, if when the chips were down, he could make it work to the best of its ability, right? And So I always kind of remembered that because that was one thing I wanted to strive for. Like I wanted to be him. I didn't want to have to use gear, as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I've been trying to master. So when somebody comes to me now and says, hey, I've got brand X clothing, brand Y boots, this type of bow, this type of pack, or I've got this kind of base layer and this kind of puffy jacket from different brands or, whatever. And like, help me, like, will it work? Or do I need to buy this? And I'm like, I've gotten to the point through teaching, moving in that direction of mastery to go, I can teach you, and you individually how to do it based on what you have, your personality, the environment you're in, and what your goals are. So if you want to learn how to build a fire, I can teach you a way. I can also teach you 6 others. So if you say, well, I really like this one method, okay, let's do that. Or you like, oh, I really like this brand. Okay, well, let's focus on that. Or I really hunt in this environment at this time of year in this particular way. Okay, well, let's focus on that. And I think it's not one way, it's how to apply the best method to the person or the group. And I think that's, to me, moving in the direction of mastery where it's not just me. It's not just me and you. It's not just me, you, and the mission now, but it's like, it's me, you, the mission, and we can do it a dozen different ways. And every one of them I'm comfortable with. Now, maybe I'm not as practiced one with the other, but like I'm aware and comfortable and know the strengths and weaknesses, and we can make this work. And that, I think, is what I've always sought in my life. And so I'm really, happy that I've finally gotten to that point, again, through a bunch of life circumstances that a lot of other people haven't had the opportunity. But nonetheless, then I get to the point where I'm like, man, what a selfish person I am if I keep this knowledge to myself. And so if people are interested, I'm more than forthcoming to say, all right, well, let's do this. And I will not engage in an argument with somebody because there's really no argument to be had.
Yeah.
If you're like, I think this is the best puffy jacket ever. And I'm like, okay, cool. Tell me why. Oftentimes they don't know why, but I'm like, okay, tell me why. But nonetheless, great. So if that's what you want, let's figure out how to get the most performance out of that for you and what you do and how you do it to keep you safe.
Yeah.
I don't have any personal or emotional attachment to it. It's like, cool, that's the way you learn, or that's what you want to do. It's like, let's do that. And along the way, I may give you some pros and cons and maybe, give you some hints or tips and tricks to maybe look at doing it a few other ways, because I know you're on your evolution as well. You're on your journey. But if this is where you are today, I can meet you there and help you today as much as I can, get you where you need to go.
That's awesome.
Again, I think I'm not the only one, right? I think there's other people doing it. I think you're doing it with fitness. But I think that's, like I said, I don't know if I said it before we started recording or not, but it's like, that's a pretty cool way to spend your life, right? To be able to help other people. But I don't think people, without the awareness, I don't think necessarily people in the outdoors know that they need the help. They're like, oh, no, I got this. Like, hold my beer. And it's like, no, not even close.
Do you ever think much about how all of these same principles apply to every area of our life?
Yeah. I might be a master or approaching mastery in this one part of my life, but I am an abject failure in a lot of others, or still a young student of the game, a fledgling. Yeah, no, 100%. It's a mindset now all of a sudden. Yeah,
it is it's a mindset, because with the Mountain Tough show specifically, we talk a ton about mindset intentionally from the perspective of mental toughness and mental fitness and mindset. What we do know is that there's a different mindset tool that is helpful at different times for different people. So if you only know one mental toughness tool, it's not that valuable as knowing 150 different mental toughness tools and then applying the right tool at the right time for the right person at the right situation in life. And that the outdoors is the exact same way of there are a lot of different tools to solve different situations, but different tools work better at different times. And some people prefer a different tool over others.
Yep.
And can still be successful. You'll see that, like, hunting is so helpful on how the backcountry and hunting highlights in a lot of ways how the rest of life is working. So there's so many things you can learn in the backcountry that those same principles are happening in business and marriage and raising your kids and interactions with interpersonal relationships. And you'll see two successful hunters that are harvesting elk consistently in two completely different ways.
Yeah.
And so the more tools that you're exposed to, the more you can start applying them at the right time. And teaching them to others like you're doing is it's crazy how that process of teaching makes that person you're teaching better, but it's making you better.
I think that's what's made me as competent as I am today is when I started teaching.
Mm.
And you hear that a lot, right?
Yeah.
And it might be the same for you, but that's truly where I began to master my craft, because you see so many different people, and it's not just me or me and you. It's like this broad swath of people and all these different mindsets and approaches, and kind of trying to meet them where they are, as opposed to trying to say, no, you have to do it this way, right? Like when people say that, I'm like, yeah, you really actually don't know what you're talking about. Like you might have a preferred way, but like you should also know a bunch of others, right?
Yeah.
So what is the term? If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, you talked about tactics or techniques. And so that's another one. It's like, I like to say to myself, take what the hunt gives you. And so for several reasons, that could be, you know, you can't shoot a 400-inch bull if they don't live there, right? Well, I also think it's a fool's errand to sit there and go, I want this experience with calling an elk in and having that interaction if you're hunting them in August in Utah or you're hunting them in November in, you know, Montana. So it's like, take what it gives you, and it's like, oh, you know what? There's too many people here. There's too many people calling. I'm going to ambush. Or it's a drought, so I'm going to sit water. And it's like being able to be comfortable making that decision and then know how, at least well-versed enough to be able to implement that tactic, right? And not just sit there and go, no, I'm going to force my will upon this. And it just doesn't. Like, I did that for a long time, right? Because my ego got in the way, and I'm a guy, right? I mean, that's what we do. And then it wasn't very effective. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but to go back to where you started this, which I think, I know I've got a lifelong still to learn on this and a lot to mine here, but it's the mindset. There's so much there. And I find it fascinating that you bring it up. I know that the first time we talked, I brought it up and we got talking to that. I think that is something that is so easily glossed over or minimized. You know, you hear mental toughness. I just kind of group it all under mindset, and then mental toughness is under that. But it's like, that alone should be like, I don't know how you do it, but like that alone should be a course. I know there's courses probably that teach mindset, but you know, what is that? And like, what is the proper mindset? I like to say perspective is a beautiful thing, right? Because oftentimes, you know, every day actually, I'll have an interaction, you know, with a person or, you know, myself or at work or my wife. And I'm like, I have the ability to manage my perspective on this, and that perspective is going to drive the outcome, be it positive or negative, right?
Yeah.
And they're always back to mindset. And it's like, that's something I certainly will never master in my lifetime. But it's like, if you have at least a few tools, man, it's a big unlock.
It's big. Yeah. Yeah, we put mindset specific curriculum in the Mountain Tough app over the last couple of years.
I know, that's what you were saying.
Specifically for that reason of we knew people would get more mentally tough through physical training, but to take a break from physically training to become more mentally strong and just learn some of the principles of it should be step one, in addition to everything we spoke about when someone preparing to go on any sort of expedition, is to go through basic mental toughness curriculum, because so much is in there that's going to help them on their journey. The simple fact of, like, a lot of mindset curriculum is going to start with worrying about what you can control and not what you can't. And then that is going to be critical in the backcountry. But then also the survival type situations, a huge part of mindset is our ability to choose our own attitude regardless of the external circumstances. So like being stuck on that cliff and deciding if you should go down in the dark and potentially break your leg, or just sit there with a positive energy and enjoy the evening. And just knowing that between like a stimulus and a response, there's a delay, and we can take advantage of that delay to control our emotions and not go into a panic situation. Like that's huge on the mountain. It's also huge in your marriage. And
Absolutely.
So I think like the more that the mindset can be discussed, the better.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'll admit that I'm far better at it on the mountain than I am anywhere else in my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wrote an article for my newsletter. It was probably last year, but it was titled "The Stoic Approach to the Mountains," because that mindset, right, has helped me. And make good decisions, find success, stay safe, get back home. But it can be applied everywhere. So, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've talked to you enough, and what you've just said, like, I think the physical training that you do here and that you promote and that you coach, like, it's as much about the physical body as it is the mental side.
Yeah.
At least to me, for me personally, getting in shape and all that, and the physical attributes are secondary to the mental side of it for me. It's like they're mutually supportive, but one with the physical without the mindset, I think is a waste of time in some regard, right? Or maybe you're not capitalizing on it as much.
Yeah, Mountain Tough's been fairly transparent over that. We believe the mental is going to trump the physical, even though we're a physical fitness business. I do believe that the mindset, the mental toughness, working on your mental fitness is always going to trump the physical. And so the physical is a really good way to build that base of cumulative experiences. Is kind of what's so cool about physical training to become more mentally tough. Because if you do a bunch of hard workouts that are designed to look impossible and turn ceilings into floors, you're becoming mentally tough in your gym or your basement or your living room. And so you're kind of getting some of that fruit that you would get by going on a backpacking trip in the middle of the summer. You're getting some of those cumulative experiences in an hour in the morning before you go to work. That's what's so cool about physical training focused on the mind, is it's kind of an easy way to get a little more mentally tough every day. You're doing something hard every day. and I've seen it work over and over again, where if someone redlines their heart rate for the first time ever in the backcountry, they go into full panic mode. But if they redlined a bunch of times that summer in the gym, they know exactly what's about to happen. Like, they're going to feel kind of weird for 2 minutes. At the 5-minute mark, they're going to feel back at 100% of recovery. But if you've never gone through some of that, then that panic starts kicking in. So I definitely am a big believer in the mental work trumps the physical. And I think that the real black and white examples I've seen of that are the situations where someone can no longer physically train due to an injury or a health condition. Like someone who's paralyzed that still has a really strong mindset. That's where you really see that, like, the mind trumps the physical. Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNTOUGH to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast.
I just can't imagine living my life and managing, stress and just life in general without having that physical component, right? That workout, that challenge, and that's just, it's kind of like getting stuck in the cliffs, right, at night and knowing that confidence to make the right decision. That's part of what that physical training is, what provides that confidence for me, right? You feel good about yourself and your ego's in a good place, and yeah, you're physically capable, but it's like, but the mental component that you get from that, I think, cannot be overstated, at least for me. That's truly where, and I've written about this a lot, but, and I don't know how you guys do it here necessarily, but I'm like, don't go in there and just do what you're good at, right? Or don't go in there and just do what you like.
Yep.
But also, don't go in there and have it climate controlled. Don't go in there and have motivational posters on the wall. Go do that, 1,000 step up with the ruck on your back with no music and just deal with your own internal dialogue and your bullshit and figure it out.
Yeah.
Because there's a really good chance that when you're confronted with that difficult situation in the mountains, you're not going to have any of that.
Yeah.
And if you've never kind of done that mental jujitsu with yourself in training, man, you might not like who you really are, you know, and know how to communicate with that side of yourself. So it's like, it all to me intermingles. And again, I mean, that's what gets me up every day and like excited to keep training and working for things and having goals and working on that, you know, trying to master this or that, or, you know, just evolving, just being that student of the game and having that mindset of, I'm here to learn. I don't want my ego to get in the way of, you know, learning from anybody. There's always something more to learn. You know, has anybody ever said they're too prepared for a backcountry hunt? Like, I've never heard it. Right. So it's like, well, that'll tell you right there that, you know, there's no end to this. It's just a continuation.
Yeah. Yeah. Lifelong learner.
Yeah.
mentality.
Which is cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It made me think too that we're really blessed to live out here and to live in Bozeman, and because we're surrounded by that mentality a lot.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that fitness relates to hunting, the like marathon world, the ultra marathon world, the trail running world, doing like a Spartan type event, or all of that starts building those cumulative experiences that are going to be helpful as an outdoorsman. And not everyone grows up that way, and not everyone lives in an environment like such as this. And the more that we can help people see that, the better, because all those things just kind of stack in that positive direction. And it is important, the hunting being protected is going to require hunters to be around for a long time. And so that topic we talked about earlier of the selfish tendencies I had earlier on to not share those secrets, like a lot of those barriers have to break down for like the hunting legacy to continue to be passed down from generation to generation. Kind of the last thing I wanted to ask you about a little bit, and then I do want to talk briefly about what the course is going to look like that you're filming later this afternoon for the Mountain Tough app. But one of the mindset related topics that I certainly went through on my journey as a hunter that I think is related to how important success is in shifting that perspective is, I think, in addition to having fun on the journey and knowing that the journey to success as a hunter is going to take a while, I think if you don't shift that perspective, I think success can also become your identity. And I think we see that more and more and more with probably a social media impact. But what that can lead to in beginner hunters or younger hunters is, if success in harvesting like a great bull with your bow is the objective, then it can become so tied to your identity that you feel like a failure if you don't harvest an elk, or the days you're out you don't harvest an elk feel like failed days, or you can be so obsessed with chasing that success, it's such a part of your identity that it can start impacting other areas of your life.
Yeah. I think once you have some success, it's easier, but I would say even today, like that can still happen to me. You know, I tell people when they'll reach out, they'll send a picture like on Instagram or something, right? And before I even look at the picture, I can read the words, and it's like, you know, well, it's not a big whatever, right? Or it's just a spike. And I'm like, I always congratulate them. And then I say, never apologize for what you kill, right? Never apologize for what you harvest, because for you, like that spike or that raghorn or, you know, that whatever with your bow or your first animal or whatever, like that's where you are. And you should be completely and utterly excited for yourself and that success, right? And I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you get to a level where you've harvested some things and maybe you're in the public eye at a little bit and it's difficult. And so I've made a very conscious effort for myself. Like, I don't want a TV show. That would be the worst thing for me in the world, right? Because I still want to go out there and hunt and feel like that little kid in Ohio who was figuring out how to shoot the bow and, you know, even shoot a squirrel, let alone a deer. And I want to tap into that. Like, that's too important to me to not, right? And so I consciously, every year, every season, and sometimes every day, and sometimes multiple times a day, tell myself to not put pressure on myself and to be that kid and enjoy the hunt, right? And to take my own advice. And if the hunt gives me the raghorn at the end of my, you know, 2 or 3 weeks or 6 weeks archery season or whatever, how many days I can be out there, that's what the hunt gives me, and that's my opportunity to either say yes or no. Right. I've realized a long time ago that I like eating elk far more than I like looking at horns. Yeah. And I've been able, luckily, to do both. But like, I just try not to put that pressure on myself because I see it. I've got friends, right? And their livelihoods are tied to it. And like, it almost seems like a miserable existence. And it's like, man, I just want to go out there and be that young kid again and like tap into that youthful energy and like just awe of being able to go out and do these things in this amazing environment. Yeah. And so I think we're all at different places on that journey, right? So the person who's starting out, don't ever apologize. But I would tell the same thing to the person at, you know, the highest level of whatever point of hunting, sheep or goat, like elk, like don't apologize for that either. Yeah. You know, and that's where I think things, you know, can get a little odd. And I just don't want to participate in that. I'm like, at the end of the day, I think hunting is a very personal thing. And, you know, nobody can tell me what to shoot or not shoot, right? Or I'm not, you know, you're not going to sway me as to what to kill. Like, that's my decision. And I got to live with whatever the outcome is. And like, I think that should be respected, you know, and too often it's tied to numbers. And, you know, we've got personal goals. I'm not telling you I don't. I'm not telling you I don't right now. Like, I want to keep pushing myself. Yeah. But ultimately, the experience is the most important thing to me. Like, I shot a whitetail last year from a tree stand, and I won't give you the whole scenario, but the way the whole thing went down, it was at day 8 or 9, you know, and he was a mature buck. And I got the shakes and was so emotionally overcome after the shot, and I'd seen him pile up 100 yards later, that I had to sit down in the tree stand. I was already standing, and it took me an hour before I ever got down. And I'm thinking, I'm like, why is this one particular buck, who certainly wasn't my biggest, right? But like, why is this engagement? Like, why did it mean so much? One, enjoy it. Like, don't dismiss it. Like, embrace it, take it in, remember it. But like, why? And to me, it was because it was the experience. It was a culmination of so many things that had to come together, and like so many, you know, years of experience shooting, and like taking my own advice and my buddy's advice, best hunter I know, and like, just hunt on instinct. Don't overthink it. Like, react, and like all that training that leads up to that, and like being able to execute in the moment of, you know, the moment of highest stress, and like all these things, and like it all came together. And I'm like, and I never posted that deer, right? Because it wasn't important to post the deer. What was important is what I did. And it's almost like talking about it, or maybe not talking about it, but posting about it and like, oh, it's just this deer without the backstory. Like it would demean this, it would demean the situation to me, right? It would just take away some of that excitement. It's like, as long as I can keep having that excitement, like, man, like to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because I'd killed a great elk like 6 weeks earlier, and it didn't even, I'm not saying I wasn't excited, but like it didn't even,
it's different.
It was totally different. And then this deer comes by and I'm like, man, but I'm like, everything that came together to make it happen was just like, it was like validating that I was on the right track, and like the things I had done were working, you know, and I wasn't a poser, you know, like I was actually taking my own advice and it was actually working out. And like, I'm like, man, if everybody could experience that, nobody would ever quit hunting. And like, everybody would just be so jacked to keep going.
Yeah.
And that's what like, if we can get people to have those experiences with the spike, with the raghorn, with 320 bull, I don't care, but just have that like emotional engagement.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It gives me goosebumps thinking about, cause that connection to how you would hunt as a kid is where it's at.
Yeah.
I mean,
for me anyways.
Yeah.
And I didn't have all the right gear.
Yeah.
I didn't have any experience, but I was so emotionally connected to it. And like that almost innocence is pretty cool.
Yeah. I remember the first time I grew up in Billings, and we had hung tree stands on the Yellowstone River.
Oh.
And we didn't know, my dad and I didn't know anything about whitetail hunting and anything about archery hunting.
Nobody knows anything about whitetail hunting in Montana.
We still don't.
It's awesome. It's hilarious.
And I remember we were we'd always like move our stands around and stuff. And I remember one night my dad couldn't go and I wanted to go. And so I drove down and sat in a stand all by myself without my dad around, and I think I was 14, and I shot a doe with my bow out of that stand that I had hung.
Wow.
And I had the shakes for like 3 days after that. And I was so excited to get that doe home and show my dad, like all on my own, by myself, without him around.
Yeah.
On a spot that we had found on stands that we had hung. And it was, white-tailed doe with my bow, but it's like one of my most like beautiful and vivid hunting memories I'll ever have.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like it's the pursuit of the journey and the moments, and it's the love of the hunt that's really important.
And that's self-reliance. I mean, I'm sure you felt like this overwhelming pride of what you had done, and your ego just swelled, and you're like, man, I did this on my own.
I remember after field dressing that doe in that field, being 14 and alone, I remember feeling like I could have wrestled a grizzly bear, right there, no problem.
Well, in Montana, you might have to.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But that is the perfect story to summarize like what we're talking about here. It's like a white-tailed doe. It doesn't. It's the experiences. For me, it's the experiences, and those are the things that I cherish the most. Not what's hanging on the wall, although that's great.
Yeah.
But it's like you don't have that doe hanging on your wall.
Yeah.
Nope. But it's your one of your best memories for hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so awesome.
Yeah.
Well, in closing, John, let's talk about the course just briefly, what it's going to look like in the Mountain Tough app.
Yeah, so I'm pretty stoked about this. Actually, it was came out of the conversation me, you, and Weston had, and I've done a lot of teaching, as I said, in person, professionally, articles, courses for outdoor class, etc. But you came to me with this idea of how about a survival tip a day for 30 days. Now, you may have kind of gathered that I'm a little bit long-winded, or can be if I want to be. And so you said, hey, let's keep it short and concise. And so what I did was, it's not going to be your necessarily traditional survival tips, although there's going to be lots of those in there, but it's going to be a progression. So you check in on day one, guess what we're going to talk about? It's mindset.
Awesome.
And so from there, we go from there, and we end with my 6 cardinal rules of the backcountry. And in between there, it's a progression, and it's just one tip a day that kind of builds on itself. Mm-hmm. That hopefully by the end of that, people are a little bit more aware, a little bit more informed, are interested enough to dig in and learn more and train. I'm a big proponent, as you are, of training, right? Mm-hmm. And gaining that experience and taking this knowledge and actually turning it into actionable, things. So that's kind of what we're going to film, and I'm excited to kind of see how it turns out. And it was a challenge to me because you wanted it short and concise. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it is. And so to take that knowledge and boil it down into bullet points, which is what this is, it was a very fascinating experience for me. And then from there, we'll see where it goes.
Oh, I'm stoked. It's going to be awesome. I think that the value of getting something new every day is going to be really engaging and kind of addicting for people, where just kind of getting pinged every day with a new tip and seeing those tips stack on top of each other, especially with also we knew we wanted this content digested, and people's attention spans are short. And so we knew there was a way that we could get this information in front of them every day, and they can come back and refer it again later on. And then I also think it's important for listeners to know that, when I asked you how you would articulate your craft, one thing I would say to that is that there's a difference between old school survival and modern day reality survival and I think the analogy that we just talked about out in the hallway is we're not really talking about building squirrel traps out in the woods. We're talking about how we would potentially use some modern day gear and mindset techniques to get through some realistic situations.
Yeah, want to make it very relevant to the hunter today. Mm-hmm. And have some tangible takeaways that, you can sit down and action on right away, that day, that week, this summer, leading up to the fall, or with your partners. Even more importantly, I think, encourage you to do that and go train. But yeah, it's, more, we'll call it modern survival or slanted more towards a modern thing. It's not primitive living. It's not bushcraft. It's Here's a mindset, here's the gear, here's some things to understand and know and have and be able to utilize when something goes wrong, to be self-reliant, ultimately to stay in the field and find more success and continue to keep that safety net. That's what we want to do. That's the takeaway. And so what success would look like for me is, and I don't know if we'd be able to measure this, but what success would be for me is that people take these daily tips and begin to integrate it into their training, and then you be able to utilize that this fall when they go out in the mountains to stay self-reliant, to keep a margin of safety, and then hopefully, however they define that, to find that success.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love the practicality of it. Here's a tip. You're going to be able to watch it quickly in the Mountain Tough app. And then I know what's going to happen is, 10 days later, 5 days later, someone can apply that exact tip. And it might be backpacking with their family. It might be spring bear hunting. It might be elk hunting. It could be anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, they're universal. Universal for anybody who's outdoors. Could be walking their dog up in the bridgers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John. We'll give you a break before.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Man, what a great conversation, everyone. I enjoyed that conversation so much with John. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thinking about it, John has skied, hunted, climbed all over the world in some of the most remote environments imaginable, in addition to him leading that special operations school for SEALs for 2 decades. His wisdom, his knowledge, everything that he has learned is incredible. But I do want to highlight how many times he talked about there's still so much to know. There's still so much to learn. There's still so much he does not know. And he's humble enough to learn from anyone. That was a phenomenal point that you can see in his heart, in his spirit. He is a lifelong learner. And that is a key to the always ready mentality. It is a key to mental fitness, is to always be pushing, always be learning, never stop taking on new challenges. And John is certainly doing a phenomenal job of that. The big takeaway for me, though, however, was how he articulated how if you want to hunt out west for your first time, to think about that 101, 102, 103 step process. So he described it as learn the foundation of being an outdoorsman, outdoorswoman first, and then start adding those tactical skills. So many times we see new hunters focus on the tactical before they focus on the foundational. So a lot of information in today's show around start with the basics. Start with putting your pack on and going outside, camping out, regardless of where you live. Don't start on the tactical first. Focus on that foundation. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more about John Barklow, you can check him out on Instagram. It is at jbarklow on Instagram. What a phenomenal human. He is going to be producing content for the Mountain Tough app as well. He stayed by after this conversation to build that module. So you are going to see a modern survival module from John Barklow launch here relatively quickly. So keep your eyes out for that. It is going to be great. It'll be a great resource to go into detail on a lot of the high-level topics he discussed today. Thanks so much for being here. We love you guys. If you haven't yet, check us out on YouTube as well at Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. We'll see you next week, and stay dangerous. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.